Thank you for coming today. Today's presentation is Mary and Carl Kimberly talking about New York Central College, which was in McGraw. Some of you may or may not know about it. They're going to give us a lot more information about it. We have one more lecture in this series. It's next week, next Wednesday, and that's going to be Chip Jeremy talking about Cortland Traction Company and Little York Park. There are refreshments if you'd like to grab some. If not, enjoy the program. I'm Mr. and Mrs. Kimberly.
Thank you for inviting us to your Lunch and Learn program. I'm apologizing for my voice. I seem to be hoarse today.
And Mary's coughing and sneezing, so it should be an interesting time.
Good to see a young man here, too. Did you get dragged in, or do you love history?
Dragged.
I understand that. Well, we'll try to make it interesting for you, too. Our presentation this morning is very short. Concept of what went on in Cortland County and McGrawville in 1849, 1861. Started before then, of course, way back. We have a tremendous amount of material. I bought a few books that you might want to look at after we're done. We'll refer to them, perhaps. I'm sure you wouldn't like to spend all the day today that we've got to talk about this, or we'd be here till dinner time tonight. That's kind of too late. It amazes me that after 168 years, people are still interested in New York Central College, what it was, what it stood for, and what it did, and its effect. I think that we need some background, so if you put on your time machine hats, we'll go back a ways. Back to the time when the Erie Canal was finished, in 1825. Tremendous amount of commerce going on. Business was booming. Syracuse was busy like you wouldn't believe. Cortland not as much so, but still busy because of the Erie Canal. And then 10 years later comes the trains following the same path. And then all at once a train down from Syracuse to Cortland. So it was a real good time of commerce. It was a good time of communication too. We don't think of the 1850s as being a time of communication when we have the computer right now in front of us, and with a few strokes of the button, we know what's going on in Hong Kong. But that was quicker too, because newspapers were being printed every week now. There was a tremendous amount of religious fervor going on. Ministers were riding their horses on the circuit rider, and there were lots of tent revivals going on all over New York State. In fact, it had a reputation and a nickname called the Burnt Over District. And just think what you ladies were doing. You were making an awful lot of noise. You thought you'd like the right to vote. Now imagine that. Why should women have the right to vote? Can't believe it. But that was going on, and it was going on pretty strong. You even said you'd like to own property. It wasn't possible for very many women to own property. Cortland County, excuse me. See if this works for me. Cortland County was an abolitionist county. Pro-slavery, pro-women's rights. Always had been known for that in the political circle. This gentleman, Samuel Ward, I'd like to introduce to you. In 1846, he was a pastor in the Congregational Church in Cortland. It was a white congregation, black pastor, and he was a fiery, he gave fiery sermons and speeches and urged those present to support anti-slavery movement and the women's rights movement. going to introduce you to a couple of other people too along the way here. This is Garrett Smith. Garrett Smith lived in Peterborough, not far from here. If you've never been to Peterborough, you should make a trip there. Very interesting community, very nice place to visit, and make appointments with Dr. Dan, Norman Dan, or his wife,
Yeah, Dot Wiltsey.
Dot Wiltsey. Because they'd love to show you what and talk to you about Garrett Smith. He was a strong supporter of blacks' Negro rights. He worked hard for their education. He started a college of his own up near Rome, New York. He owned an awful lot of land. He had he was very wealthy and had a lot of land. He gave much of his land to black families because he believed that blacks should vote. And by giving land with a value of $250 to a black man, then this gentleman had the right to vote because of his net worth. And you had to have $250 to vote. This is a map of central New York State. There's Cortland. There's McGrawville just outside of Cortland. There's Peterborough right there. I'm not sure whether you can see it or not. But it was about 10 miles northeast of Casanova. Casanova was important because it was a meeting place many times for women's rights conventions and anti-slavery movements conventions in Casanova. To get to Casanova, you had to go through DeRuyter. Between here, DeRuyter, Truxton, DeRuyter, Casanova, Peterborough. In DeRuyter, and remember this, we'll get this into about later. Ezra Cornell lived in DeRuyter. He was the founder of Cornell University. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. So you've got an idea of where these people lived. Now in Homer, which of course you know where Homer is, but back then it was a horse and buggy ride, so it was a ways. A gentleman by the name of White lived in Homer. He was the first president of Cornell University. We're going to bring that into a circle later on. This is a picture of what McGraw looked like in about 1860. Camera pictures were not good then like they are now, digital. Photography's only been in use probably for about 1825, 1850, 1860, 35 years. So it's a new concept to take pictures, and you don't see many. But in through here is downtown McGraw. McGrawville. Most all of the houses are sheltered, clustered right around here. Over here you notice quite a good sized open area, and that's where the college is going to be. To give you an idea, from here to the two churches up on Main Street, Baptist and Methodist, would be about a little over a third of a mile, a little over a quarter of a mile. So it's off to its side that we're talking about. In just a minute, we'll meet a man by the name of Cyrus Pitt Grosvenor. He was president of American Free Baptist Society. He and his wife worked hard for this organization. The purpose of the American Baptist Free Missionary Society was to spread the word of God. They were located in chapters throughout central New York State, Ohio, Indiana. This society was quite large. He was the president of the one in central New York. He was located at Madison College. Madison College is now Colgate University. So this has evolved from Madison College, which is a seminary for men only, and it had a leaning towards slavery. But in the manner of, they believed in the rights of states to govern themselves versus the federal government. It was the federal government which was saying no to slavery. They thought that the states should make up their own because the North did not need low-cost labor. The South did need low-cost labor to run their fields, run their agriculture, raise their cotton, and raise their rice. So that was the rub that led up to the Civil War, of course. Got to catch up. This is downtown Main Street. If I get it correctly, you'll notice this is a dirt road. Am I correct? Quite often I called it a road dirt. A dirt road was all there was in McGraw. Wooden planks for sidewalks. Stores that were right up to the street front. Down at this end, you'll notice that these are all wooden structures made out of lumber. And they burned in 1906 and have been rebuilt so that end of the village is brick down here, this end up here is. This is the type of village, the setting of the village that they're inviting a college to come into.
About 500 population at the time.
The population of McGraw at that time would have been about 550, wouldn't it? This is the American Baptist Free Missionary Society that we talked about. Back to Madison College. One of the students in Madison College, which is now Colgate, wrote a paper opposed to slavery. He wrote a scathing paper for one of his college terms against slavery. The people in the college did not like that. It was opposed to the concepts that the college was set up for, which was states' rights. They kicked him out of school. Didn't like what he wrote? Goodbye, you're out. So, times were a little bit different then. The Free Baptist Society took the side of the young man and they said, we're going to start a college of our own for people who want to think for themselves, to be independent. And they said, we're going to support a college. And it's going to be a college that all people can go to, blacks and whites. It's going to be a college that male and female can go to, which is very rare back then. And it has no basis on the religion. Whatever your beliefs are doesn't matter, you can still come. But they had to raise money. So they went around all of New York State and parts of Pennsylvania, raising money and drumming up interest for the college that they wanted to open. 2 communities in New York State decided to share the concept and have the college in their community. Perry, New York, and McGrawville, New York. And when you say McGrawville, really a lot of the support came from Cortland and Homer. It was to be settled in McGraw. We'll show you why in a minute. They finally chose to support and go for and encourage the college to be in McGrawville because they had decided that McGrawville would raise $12,000, quite a lot of money for that day and age, to support the college. Perry only put up $7,000, so they said, well, we're going to meet in McGraw. That's better. And this is the church that they met in. This is the Baptist Church at McGraw. It's still in operation. It was formed in 1832. Had this meeting in the church there in McGraw. Still in operation. It's been added to it. It has a different steeple, so it doesn't look just like that anymore. But they met here. Cyrus Pitt Grosvenor came, of course. Horace Greeley, that's a name that you know in the newspaper communication. And a group of people from Hamilton, from Madison College, the American Free Baptist Missionary Society, came to McGraw and met with village residents at this Baptist church. There's a picture of Horace Greeley. So he's really quite a handsome gentleman and quite well endowed with money. Got a nice beard there. If you ladies like beards, good looking man. The papers of that time, newspapers, this particular one is called the McGrawville Express, called a family newspaper, neutral in politics.
Most of them weren't at that time, right?
That's true. It was printed by and edited by Clisby and Boynton. Boynton is a local man in Cortland County. Printed in a building in McGraw. He also printed the newspapers for Homer and for Cortland. This paper is August 12th, 1847. We have the newspaper for 2 years of papers, and we put them on CD. We've copied them digitally onto a CD so that you can borrow it and look up anybody can borrow it or buy it and look up any paper. But anyway, I have the same paper here, only a little larger so that I can read it. And this is why they chose McGraw. I thought you'd like that. The first reason why McGrawville is preferred is because of its central position in the great Empire State. The second is because of the nearness and access of all seasons of the year. It is but 35 miles from Syracuse, a half a day's drive. Imagine half a day's drive. And especially it says on good roads, on first-rate roads all seasons of the year. It is preferred also because of its remoteness from other institutions of learning of a similar nature, and for its retired and healthy position. Apparently they thought people in McGraw were healthy. They desire it likewise in a retired village because it would be free from contaminating vices like gambling and drinking. So students, no more gambling or drinking. Anyway, I just thought it'd be fun to show how it was written, a little bit about the language. You can look at the rest of this if you want to. They're interesting. Now there are five.
Before he goes on, I'll add one note. Minutes were taken at the Baptist church that evening and put in the church minutes. The church clerk happened to be the postmaster of the village, and he thought, I need to keep these safe, so I'm going to put them in the safe at the post office. Post office was robbed. The safe was taken. And all of our minutes from about 1830 up until the 1840s were gone. I'd love to see the person who robbed when they opened it up and found church records. That taught them.
There's the building. Isn't it a beautiful building? Gorgeous building.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice looking building. Other pictures that we have of it, not many, but show its beauty from each direction it looks at. The main part of the building was 100 foot by 40 foot, so it really isn't too large. 100 foot by 40 foot. The main section right here is 3 stories plus a cellar, so they call it 4 stories. There's 2 wings, right here and one here. And the wings are 2 stories and the cellar. None of that building is left at the present time. There are a couple of things from it that I'll show you in a minute. The college board was established. Reverend Cyrus Governor was appointed president. Curriculum was selected and teachers and professors hired. The college opened in 1849 and the village celebrated with a big parade and an ox roast. So if you like ox meat, well, you've got a whole ox roasted there for you.
There's a box here in the window. A lady from Boston was writing, I can't remember who at the time, somebody that had gone to school here. And she wanted to know what the box was for. And I said, well, I'd really like to think that McGraw was very progressive at that period of time. It's probably air conditioning. But I said, I don't think so. So we really don't know what the box is for. Maybe somebody put their lunch in it on a windowsill. Or maybe it was a lab and they had some kind of a test they were doing. But if you look up close, you can see people standing in front of the building. It's an interesting photograph.
This railing came from that college building we just saw. It's 22 foot long, and they claim that it went from the first to the second floor. Now that's a long ways, quite a big long railing, quite a high up. And it came into it, the way they describe it, it came into an open lobby. This building was on the 167 acres of the farm. Everybody had to work at the college. It was called the Manual College. Everybody worked. This building is on 167 acres. The acreage was out behind the building, like this, and the college is over here. This is still standing, one of the very few buildings that's had any affiliation.
What road is that, Carl?
That's Academy Street.
Makes sense.
I think it was School Street at the time. I'm not positive.
There really wasn't any street until this college went there, and then they built a road called the School Street, and now it's Academy Street. The high school, the current high school, is right in this location back here.
I have a question.
Yes.
So would they take your work in lieu of payment, or was it in addition to the payment?
The tuition at the college was $30 for either men or women for a year.
I can hang with that, yeah.
You won't like the rest of it. The manual work, each student had to work as part of their coming to the college as a student. They could do work with gardening, vegetables, farm food for cattle, or tending to the cattle themselves. The men got 6 cents an hour, women got 3.
Okay, so of course there's a division of labor where the women allowed to cook as part of their work at work.
Well, they had to do
Yeah, it had to
farm
do something.
work,
Yeah,
but
they had to do
couldn't
farm work
do
too.
domestic work.
Oh,
They
okay.
called it domestic
A
work.
domestic work. Yeah. Sorry.
But no, don't be sorry, thank you. This building still stands and looks just about like that.
What is it now used for?
A single-family residence.
And
The Widger family have owned it and lived there since about 1900.
so this
4
is the fourth
generations.
generation living there.
And one of their grandsons owns it now. This is a very poor picture, but it's worth enclosing because there's the main part of the college.
Yeah.
That's what east and west avenue now. They were little lanes that came up around to get into the college if you wanted to bring your horse and buggy up if you were visiting. This was a girls' dormitory. It was quite a large building. It would house about 40 girls would live in that building if they wanted to. it had a cafeteria room, or a dining hall, they called it, which would feed about 100 persons at a sitting. The men and the girls, men and the women ate in that building. They said in the kitchen they had ovens which would bake 32 loaves of bread at a time. And over here are a couple of outbuildings. Really don't know anything about them. They look probably like they would have been barns to go with the cattle, but I'm not sure. There's a picture of Mr. and Mrs. Grosvenor. That's the house they lived in, McGraw. These pictures are taken in 1975. That's where they lived. Very unusual to have a house listed and deeded in a woman's name, but this house was bought by Mrs. Grosvenor when they moved to McGraw.
There were, at the start of the, I think I should be over here. 3 black professors were hired. And it was William Allen, and George Riesen, and Charles Riesen. And what was interesting was the write-ups that we hear, the descriptions about these professors, they were all well-liked. And the studies were unbelievable. I don't have a list of them here, but it was amazing what they studied, Latin and Greek and presentation and English and all kinds of maths. Anyways, William was the first black professor to be hired, and he taught Latin and was well liked by his students. Unfortunately, he became involved with a young white student, Mary King, and they decided they wanted to be married. She went back to Fulton, where her family lived. Her father was a minister there. William went to get permission to marry. Well, it didn't go over too well in Fulton. Residents heard about it. They were really upset, and William escaped with his life. If he'd been caught, he'd probably been tarred and feathered, or even worse. They must have made plans ahead of time, because he headed for Manhattan and she followed shortly afterwards. They were married there, and then they moved to London. We know nothing more about them. We don't know what happened to them after that. Europe seemed to be much more open-minded to different races than certainly the U.S. was at that time. Charles Riesen was the second professor, and he taught French, and information said that his classes were reportedly popular with black and white students alike. He might have been the first black professor to be hired to teach white students in a college. The third professor was George Riesen, and prior to coming to McGrawville, he had received a Bachelor of Arts degree, earned a master's degree, and then went on to study law. He applied for admission to the Allegheny County Bar and was denied due to his race. The reason was that colored people were not considered citizens. Well, he came into New York State, he took the bar exams, and he passed. And in 1848, he was the first black lawyer in New York State.
You said Allegheny County is where?
Pennsylvania.
Okay.
He was well liked, was here in McGrawville for 3 years. In the meantime, his mother and sister had both died. The sister had children, and there was no one to take care of them. So he took on that job. It may be that the reason he was asked to leave, maybe the board thought it was distracting. He couldn't concentrate on his teaching because of the children, and he was asked to leave. So he went back to Pennsylvania and taught law there. About 7 or 8 years ago, we read in a Syracuse newspaper that a descendant of this George Riesen was applying to the Bar Association, the Pennsylvania Bar Association, to get him accepted into their association as a lawyer. And so I think it's maybe like a great, I don't know if it's one or two great grandsons, also a lawyer currently, succeeded in getting him recognized as a lawyer for the Pennsylvania Bar Association posthumously. And it was a really good, the descendant was really pleased about it. We sent him information because he didn't even know that this man had taught in our small college. So we get notifications every once in a while of what's going on in Mr. Vachon's name with the Pennsylvania Bar Association.
To me, this gentleman does not really look black. So I did a little research on it. His grandfather was white. His grandmother was black. So he's 1/4 black. All of the other relatives in this family were white, except for his grandmother. He's 1/4 black. But no matter how much black blood you had in you, you were Negro, you were not a citizen of our country, you were not treated equally as whites. So here's a gentleman with a shirt and tie and a lot of education, but there were things he couldn't do. The college started out known as the McGrawville Free Central College. That meant that it was free to people who wanted to come because it was open to both sexes, all colors, and all religions. But some of the people felt it was going to be free financially, and that had to be stopped, so they changed the name to McGrawville Central College. 20 students enrolled the first year. By 1850, it had gone up to 120. So it seemed to be doing well. Growing. Tuition was about $30. We mentioned that. Men worked in the field and earned 6 cents. Women, 3 cents for doing domestic work. Labor, manual. Manual labor was an important aspect of the college, since the college had been conceived with the ideas of reform, pure religion, and work labor. In 1850, a smallpox broke out among the students. The black students really suffered from smallpox because they had not had any inoculations. Most of the white students had. We don't know for sure how many black students were buried in the black cemetery, which is located behind the hills. Our records indicate that no white students died. Up behind that building that you saw, the main building, was a small cemetery. This is a little better picture of it. It's still there. Our high school students and some volunteers are taking care of it. They go up once or twice a year and weed it, cut the dead weeds out, tall brush, paint the fence that's around it. A white fence has been put around it now. Originally it was some kind of a black metal fence. There was a question as to whether there would be graduation that year, because quite a few of the students went home. It was a scary situation, smallpox. Smallpox was also noted in Freetown and Cincinnatus. Enrollment dwindled. Well, before that, I want to say that graduation did take place in this dear lady, she's a dear, sweet little lady, Lucretia Mott, a name that many of you know for the women's movement. Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Mott, all strong women's advocates, leaders. She came to college and spoke to the students. The enrollment dwindled. Creditors were asking for their money. Everybody turned to Garrett Smith. Remember we talked about him, we met him before? He helped out when needed. The American Baptist Free Missionary Society, which had helped form the college, pulled back with their funding because they were opening another college, Colgate Rochester, in Rochester, New York, and they were supplying that with financing. So this suffered. Many of the people that had pledged money towards the 12,000 did not, in fact, pay off. And so there was really a shortage of money. How could the school get along by itself? It couldn't. The state university did not recognize the college, and therefore they did not support it with funds from the public treasury as they did other colleges in the state. Smith, Garrett Smith again, purchased the college. He purchased all the buildings and the 167 acres in 1858, thinking he could save it from the creditors, but it was too late. Despite the finances being very shaky, the college continued to operate for the next few years. Closed in 1859. Reopened as an academy. Central College and Academy was now not the New York Central College. And then it became McGrawville Union School and used just for high school purposes. I think it's very important. Mary introduced you to the 3 black professors. I think it's very important. It's the issue that really is quite excited about the whole process. And that is that no other college in the United States, recognized college, had 3 black professors teaching with white professors, teaching white and black students, male and female, together. It was the first time in our nation that that happened, and it was in Cortland County in McGrawville. Mary, would you like to tell us just a little about some of the students that went here?
Most of the students came from this local area and also surrounding states. They also came from Haiti, from Cuba, from Scotland. Quite a variety of countries represented. There was a story about a tall black student in a long white robe with a yellow turban who would walk around the village every once in a while. Wouldn't that have been interesting to see? Charles Wickwire attended for 1 year, and Frank Place attended for 1 year, and he wrote several papers on the history of Cortland County and also the New York Central College. Carl's great-great-grandfather, William Carlisle Schuler, and his wife, Mary, and their daughter Kate attended for 1 or 2 years. And I thought that was interesting that Mary and Kate had the opportunity as women to get a little education.
What did Demonia Lewis do?
Okay, 5 minutes now. And Monia was a dog. She was part Negro and part Indian. Parents died, and she wound up living with an aunt. And her brother brought her to McGrawville, and she stayed 3 years. The story goes that she was asked to leave at the end of 3 years because she was going a little wild. I always thought she'd be interesting to know, but not because she was wild, but I thought she was. Strange thing, she didn't study art at all while she was here, when it was offered. When she went on to Oberlin College, she studied. And she's well known for her sculptured pieces of famous people. She went to Boston after she got done at Oberlin, became acquainted with 2 ladies who became her mentors, And also, she wrote them a lot of times asking for money. She went on to Rome, and that's where she became successful. She tried selling her pieces here, and nobody wanted them. And then Mary and Emily Edmondson were 2 of 12 children, born to a slave mother. Father had managed to save some money and bought a farm in Maryland, which still exists.
Where is it in Maryland? The farm. Where is the farm?
I don't know. We had somebody contact us in Florida, and it was somebody who was distantly related to
It's on,
the family.
it's on Route 270, Route 270,
You remember?
going northwest out of Washington DC.
Okay.
And it's about 15 miles outside the city.
Okay, now it's probably part of
It-
suburb, but it's still in existence?
That's what we were told by this lady.
This lady who is distant relatives to the Edmondson family has gotten permission to try to put the farm together. She's buying the lots back. They're very expensive,
Oh, yes, of course, yeah.
of course. But it's mostly vacant land where she is. She's trying to put the farm back together. She's gone before federal Congress to ask them for funding to do this. And they are in favor of helping her, so it looks like it's going to happen. We've been in touch with her some. When we were in, Mary and I go to Florida during the winter.
Yeah.
And when we were in Florida, this woman who was be like a grandniece, I think, twice removed grandniece of these ladies, called us and asked us for information.
No, we haven't heard from her recently, so
But
we
we
don't
haven't heard from
know
her.
any, we don't know how she's
Anyways,
coming.
that's where it is.
Anyways,
Sorry.
because the mother was a slave, the children were considered slaves. So these 2 young girls were sold up and down the East Coast as slaves from Baltimore to New Orleans, back and forth and back and forth. Brothers found out, what was really sad was one of the 2 girls, I can't remember which, the story goes that one of the girls was so pretty that the slave owner had her stand out in front and kind of hawk, come in and see what we have inside.
Oh, shoot.
Anyways, 2 of the brothers found out that they were in New Orleans, managed to get money together, and bought their freedom. They went back to Baltimore. Why? Well, I think maybe because the mother was still there. But anyways, they were captured again and taken to a slave warehouse. The father heard about it, and he contacted Henry Ward Beecher. And Mr. Beecher, with some other men, managed to get money together, got their freedom, and brought them up to New York State. Knew about Garrett Smith, and Garrett brought them to McGraw. They had had no education, so probably they were in Keziah King's primary class, because they had ABCs, just right, the elementary. They went on to Oberlin, and they wanted to become missionaries and go into Canada to work with the black slaves who had run away. Mary died while they were there. Emily went on to work in Washington, D.C. at a school. And then it was for freed black girls. And then she came up to Peterborough and married, and was involved a little bit in the anti-slavery movement. We don't know what happened to him after she married. There's no records of what. Maybe they went into Canada. We don't know for sure. Mr. Hamama Bakwakwa came on a slave ship to Brazil from Africa. And from there, the ship went to Haiti. And it was coming up to New York. And he was serving as he was serving for a ship's captain. The abolitionists found out that he was on board and they were going to try and rescue him, but they did. And they sent him on to Boston. And then American Free Baptist Missionary people brought him to McGrawville. And he was here for 3 years. By 1857, his studies were completed, And he really wanted to go back to Africa, so he went to England first. We know he went to England. We know nothing more of what happened to him. We don't have any records, and we've done a little research and haven't found what might have happened to him. Dr. Benjamin Bozeman. Can you show his picture?
Sure.
Okay. He attended our college from 1853 to 56. And he served as a Civil War Army surgeon. Reverend John Bunyan Reeve, he went on to attend Union Theological, I'm standing in your way maybe, Theological Seminary in New York City, and he was the first African-American student there. He pastored in several churches and taught at Howard University. Asaph Hall was a student for 2 years, and as an American astronomer, he discovered the 2 moons of Mars. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing them correctly, Deimos and Phobos, in 1877. He held a minor position at the Harvard U Observatory, where he continued his studies, and he was a professor of mathematics at U.S. Naval Observatory. He met and married a student who was also teaching to pay for her tuition at the college. And after they moved to Washington, he was doing some studies, and he was asking his wife to write the papers for him so that he could present them. And she decided she wanted to pay for it. And he said, "No, you're my wife, and I want you to write the papers for me as I write them." She said, "I quit." And she did. He found someone else to copy his information. Willoughby Babcock, from Homer. He studied from 1850 to 1856. He didn't come consistently, so we're not sure what was going on in his life at that time. And he fought in the Civil War, 75th New York Volunteers. So that's just a sampling of our students that were here, and we just picked them out just randomly. It was an interesting time in our community.
After the college finally closed, it sat vacant for a number of years. The main building was demolished in 1885, and a new school built by the village. Lumber and doors and the cupola were purchased by the Bean brothers, who had a farm on Route 41 between McGraw and Polkville. Some of the lumber from the main college was used to build this barn. Whoops, I'll let you read that. I like this, and we're careful what we say. First of all, the idea of having 3 black professors teaching is very unique. So I like that concept. We're very careful what we say about what happened after the college, but I'm going to give you a couple of suggestions of what might have happened. What happened to the buildings, and I just read to you about one of them. There's a barn that was built, that's on West Academy Street in McGraw, still standing, and it was built in lumber. And there's another barn that the Bean brothers built on Route 41. Notice the cupola on top. That's what was on top of the main barn, the main building of the college. Hurricane Hazel took that off in 1954, so it's been gone since then. It blew it to the ground and it was smashed so that it couldn't be replaced.
The building is still standing.
The building still
Yeah,
stands.
still used as a barn.
One of the wings from the female boarding hall that I talked to you about, and remember what the building sort of looked like that you were seeing back there with the 3 stories and a wing? It was moved to the corner of South and Academy Street, became a single-family house, and it still looks like this, and it's very well taken care of. The farmhouse is still in good shape. We've talked quite a lot about that. And that's the end of our program. So at this point, just 12 o'clock, just 1 o'clock, if some of you have to leave, that's perfectly all right. The program is done. However, I'd like to extend it and go on just a little further.
Yeah.
So feel free to go. Not very long?
No.
Not very long. You've heard the better half. These 4 books, written by Albert Hazen Wright, the Cornell professor in the 50s and 60s. He wrote one of them on Andrew Dickman White. White, I told you, lived in Homer, and he was the president, first president of Cornell. Yes, feel free to go.
Sorry.
Second book, remember I mentioned that there were a lot of colleges being formed at that time, smaller colleges. They didn't seem to be big and huge, and expensive. This book that Mr. Wright wrote was about a book in Montour, about a college in Montour Falls. It was just called The People's College. And it also had, I don't know whether I can get to it right away quick. May not be here, but I've seen the picture. But it was a very beautiful building.
Was it different in any way, like McGrawville?
I haven't studied it enough to know. It was not, they did not talk about the abolitionist movement as much in either the People's College Ovid, New York, near the Seneca Lake. Willard Hospital still there. At that location and part of the buildings of the Willard Hospital, there was a college, and it was called an agricultural, New York State Agricultural College. So here you've got, that very definitely could have had a bearing. And this one is on New York Central College, McGraw. So you've got this gentleman who was professor at college at Cornell, telling about Cornell's early history. And now you're doing my conjecture. Don't have the study for it, don't have any reference or material that says this. But with Mr. White living in Homer, just a few miles from McGrawville, with Edward Cornell living in DeRuyter, not far from here, and Garrett Smith, who was a strong advocate of the college, living just 10 or 15 miles beyond, how could Ezra Cornell not have been aware of what was going on here? And my feeling is that I like to think that New York Central College and these other 3 colleges, the other 2 colleges, were a precursor to Cornell University. Now, I'm careful to say that, it's strictly my opinion, but I really believe that the ideals of what went on in Cortland County, in McGrawville, in New York Central College, did in fact affect Cornell University. Other books that are on the table, I brought them just to show you what was in our collection. What would be real fun is to take 2 or 3 people who really wanted to study this and spend 6 weeks together going over these books and studying. A book by Norman Dan. Elizabeth Cady Stanton was his daughter's, was his own cousin. So Garrett Smith and Cady Stanton were cousins.
Garrett Smith was invited to serve on the board at Cornell, but declined. That was after the college closed.
Did he give a reason?
I think he was probably ready to go back to Peterborough and he was really interested in, it didn't work because the runaway slaves who came to this area
Thank you.
weren't used to working on their own. They had
I'll
been,
turn that
you know,
off.
they've been told what to do
Let me
all of
show
their
some more
lives.
pictures.
And now they had land given to them and they had no
These aren't
idea what
part
to
of
do with it. They needed somebody else. So it didn't really work out the way he thought it would. It did for a little while, but it wasn't quite as successful as he
Any
wished.
evidence, can I ask one more question? Any evidence of connection, either directly or indirectly, with Harriet Tubman? Because she was from Maryland, that was where she was
Yes,
enslaved,
we don't know
in
yet.
Cambridge.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be
North.
surprising.
North Star Country. It's titled Upstate New York and the Crusade for African American Freedom. This is written by Milton Cerna.
Senate, from
Senate.
Yes, right,
yeah,
Senator
Syracuse
Cerna.
University.
S-E-R-N-E-T-T.
Is it Cerna? Okay.
Professor at New York at Syracuse University. And what I didn't say, but I need to and still will. New York, Cortland County Historical Society has quite a collection of New York Central College memorabilia. They've been extremely courteous and helpful to Mary and I whenever we've come up for any reason. And I strongly urge you to use this. Onondaga County Historical Society has a tremendous collection too of Garrett Smith's papers. And in many of those, New York Central College is mentioned. So if you're really studying this at all more, go there. This North Star Country book with Milton Cerna, talking about the rights and the advocates for both women's rights and black rights. In this book, right there in the plaid coats are the Edmondson sisters that we talked about. If you go to Peterborough, you want to talk to Norman Dan. And he's written 2 or 3 books. This one is When We Get to Heaven, had more about runaway slaves on the road to Peterborough. Not so much about New York Central College, but the way that Garrett Smith lived and his concepts of life and the right things to do. Good book. We talked about Baquaco. I can't pronounce it. Muhammad, B-A-Q-U-A-Q-U-A. Baquaco. I think that in this book, Professor Lovejoy is a professor or retired professor at York College in Ontario, Canada. This book, I believe, was written by Baquaco himself. It was a biography written in Portuguese. That was his language. And it's been translated by this Professor Lovejoy into English. And then the second book by Lovejoy that tells more about Baquaco's life. One interesting story concerning these two.
And then I think you better end.
All right, sure, do that.
They've heard more than they want to about now.
Professor Lovejoy called up a couple of years ago, and we've enjoyed our friendship with him. And he said, I want to make an appointment. And he knew we were only open a few hours. He said, I'd like to spend more time in McGrawville with you and Mary. And I'm bringing 2 guests. So he came with 2 professors from Brazil.
Huh.
There was 2 professors from Brazil and then Professor Lovejoy from Canada that we were meeting with. The 2 professors were rewriting the curriculum for all of the schools in Brazil. And they wanted to have Baquaco as a main character in part of their history of Brazil and slavery. Baquaco, as Mary said, was, I say it right out, he was stolen from Africa and taken to Brazil. He was sold to a baker and worked for a baker in Brazil for quite a few years. Then he got away, escaped, and went to Haiti. these two gentlemen from Brazil who were rewriting the curriculum were most interested in knowing what kind of a lifestyle did he live in, Bagua. And we talked to them about the college, we talked to them about black history in our area, and we talked to them about the black cemetery. And they said they'd like to see the cemetery. Well, it's not far, it's not a hard walk. Go up past the high school, the current high school's baseball field, and there's an open path that's always mowed right up to the cemetery. So we took them up, only of course I took them on a shortcut. And we walked up through the woods, and it was in October, it was in early October. And they said, stop. So we stopped, they said, just listen now, okay, just listen. Carl, you go on walking up the road. So I go on walking up the little tiny path, walking along. So hear that? I didn't hear anything special. They were listening to my feet shuffle through the fall leaves, and they never heard that noise before. Feet. He kicked it, and they got out their phones, which they could record the sound on as well as take a picture. And they were so interested. They said, we've never heard that noise before. Well, there's been a lot of fun stories, and Mary and I have enjoyed it, and it's what we've done with our retirement. And we've just enjoyed it very much. And we've enjoyed being here today.
Can I make a comment?
That's
He
your
said,
voice.
Carl, I live where the farm was. Of course I do that. Right where all the black and white students would have been outside picking up crops. And she says, I look out my kitchen window and I see them out there. There they are, these students from 1850. And she says, I've got to write about them. Now she's really good. She's a professional gynecologist. Genealogy. She loves to research genealogy. What did I say, gynecologist?
Wait a minute.
That was a little comment. Okay.
Better sit down, Carl.
Genealogy. She loves to do genealogy.
Oh dear.
And she does it as a part-time.
There's your history for
Can
you.
you erase that? I hope you erase that.
She wouldn't be about that. She's not a gynecologist.
I don't know what he's thinking, but I don't want to.
Got it, Tom.
Back to genealogy, Carl.
Yep. She said, I want some help from you because I don't know how to do it. But I want to write about the black students, the white students that went to the college. Now, there were 1,100 of them over the 10 years, 1,100 students. Catherine Hanslett, who was a teacher at Cortland State, library director, she wrote an awful lot of information on New York Central College. And we were very thankful for having her papers in this building and in our building. But this Marlene Parks said, I want to write about the students. She started researching those 1,100 students. She's found information, 160 years later, she's found information in old newspapers, old writings, and old obituaries on over 600 of the students out of the 1,100.
Wow.
So far, she's not talking. And it started 2 years ago. This is her first book, and it goes from A to G. Talks about all of the students from A to G. And she and I were talking the other day whether we can finish it in 2 books, 2 more, or should there be 3 altogether, or should there be just 2? So this is a kind of research that some people are doing, and I think it's wonderful, and I've had a lot of fun being part of it. I take any questions. I know I'm over our limit. Thank you very much. You knew I was going over. Take any